Shabbat Shalom, family and friends. We are in the 7th Torah portion named Vayetze, and he went out, is what it's translated to in English. It takes place in Genesis chapter 28, verse 10, through chapter 32, verse 3. It also includes the writings of the prophets in Hosea, the book of Hosea, chapter 12, verse 13 through chapter 14, verse 9. It also includes the 24th, 25th, and 26th Psalm, as well as in the Renewed Covenant, the book of John, chapter 1, verse 43 through 51. And the Torah portion starts off with Jacob fleeing his home after he has deceived his father, Isaac, into giving him the firstborn blessing. And so he's leaving and he's heading towards his family members, where that his mother sent him to, Rebecca, to where her brothers, where her brother and where her family is. And so he heads out, escaping. While he's running away, you could say, he stops and takes a rest. And while he's resting, he has a dream. And he sees in the dream a ladder, and he sees angels ascending and descending on this ladder. And in that dream, the Lord tells him that I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your descendants. So here, God is reaffirming the covenant that he has made with Jacob's fathers. And so he names the place Bethel, and he makes a vow, and this is what I find curious. He makes a vow to God, and in verse 20 of chapter 28, Jacob says, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone, which I've set up as a memorial stone, by the way, that was the stone that he used as a pillow to rest, will be God's house. And of everything that you give me, I would assuredly give a tenth to you. Here you see another reference to the tithe. I mean, we first see it with Abraham giving a tithe to Melchizedek, and here you see Jacob talking about a tithe. I find it interesting that Jacob makes this conditional statement on when the Lord will be his God and when he'll give a tenth to God. I mean, this is Isaac's son, Abraham's grandson. I would have thought that he would have already had a strong relationship with the Lord. But like all of us, we have to go through our own journey with the Lord. And we see in this Torah portion, Jacob maturing in his faith. So Jacob sets out on his journey and he enters Haran. He comes across some men and asks them if they know Laban. And fortunately, they do, and it happens to be that Laban's daughter, Rachel, was arriving with some sheep. So Jacob kisses Rachel, raises his voice, and weeps. I mean, traveling in those days was much more dangerous than it is to travel in the U.S. today. Plus, you can really get lost and spend years trying to find someone. So he must, I imagine a part of this, he had to feel very relieved to have finally found Laban's family. Now, I did want to point out that when those men point out Rachel to Jacob, he asked them to water and pasture the sheep. And I don't know if it's because he wanted to speak to Rachel alone. After all, scripture notes that she was beautiful, but it's likely he liked her once he saw her. The men noted that they were waiting for all the flocks so that they can roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Now, it could have been because that stone was heavy, but it looks like Jacob was able to roll that stone himself. So I just want to point out that Jacob seemed to be a pretty strong man. We tend to think of Esau as the strong, the manly brother, but Jacob, although he wasn't as hairy as Esau or enjoyed a good hunt as much as Esau, like he was a strong man as well. So Rachel brings Jacob to her house, and Jacob meets his uncle Laban. Now Jacob was pretty sly. Now Jacob was pretty sly how he received the birthright from Esau and the firstborn blessing from Isaac, but he met his match with Laban. And what I find funny is that after a month staying with Laban, Laban tells him, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now, I don't know if it sounds this way to you, but I find that the way it's worded is it's a crafty way of telling someone that you expect them to work. So tell me, how much am I going to pay you to work here? So letting them know you're not staying here for free. He's going to pull his weight. So in scripture, Jacob asks to serve Laban 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. Laban agrees. Now, when it came time for Laban to give Rachel to Jacob in marriage, he gives him Leah. Now, Jacob doesn't realize that it's Leah until the morning, and then he confronts Laban. And he asks why Laban deceived him. And if you look, Laban doesn't really give him an answer other than it's not practice in that place to marry off the younger daughter before marrying off the firstborn daughter. But Laban had 7 years to tell Jacob that, to make that clear. He didn't make it clear until until after Jacob already had relations with Leah. So Laban doesn't really seem repentant and really offers to marry off Rachel after Jacob works an additional 7 years of work. Now, I would like to think that this changed Jacob's perception on how it is to deceive or trick someone, as he was now on the other side of being tricked. Now, after some time, Jacob had asked Laban to send him away so that he could go back to his own country. And Laban doesn't want him to go. Now, note that Laban was blessed on Jacob's account. Jacob even notes that Laban didn't have as big of a flock as he now had with Jacob's assistant. Laban himself notes that by divination, he had determined that the Lord had blessed him on Jacob's account, which tells us that Laban did not serve the Lord either, but he knew that he was blessed because of Jacob. So they enter into another deal to coerce Jacob to stay longer working for Laban. Jacob is to go through the flock and remove all speckled or spotted sheep and every black sheep. and those sheep will be Jacob's. And over time, Jacob's flock became stronger than Laban's, to a point where Laban's sons became jealous of Jacob's success. And even Laban was no longer friendly towards Jacob. So Jacob talks to his wives, and I find it interesting that we see here where he's actually, it almost looks like that he's consulting his wives as to, like, to get their buy-in to leave. And he tells them the situation. He tells them how their father has cheated him and changed his wages 10 times. He tells them of a dream he had where God tells him to return to the land of his birth. And Leah and Rachel, they both agree for him to follow what God has told their husband. So they leave to return back to the land of Jacob's birth, and Laban pursues them. Now, I think it's fair to assume that Laban is probably angry. This is evident as he gathers his kinsmen to pursue Jacob. However, God came to Laban in a dream where he is told to be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Laban confronts Jacob, and Jacob argues with Laban. And here is where I believe where we see evidence of Jacob's spiritual maturity. Verses 41 and 42 of chapter 31, they note the following, and this is Jacob speaking. For these 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and for the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night. So we see here that Jacob is attributing his success to God. He's no longer relying on his own wit and mind, but on God. He recognizes that if it weren't for the Lord, he wouldn't have anything. Remember that conditional statement that he had made in chapter 28 of when he would worship the Lord? I mean, that was met by the Lord. Jacob is now returning home a wealthy man, a married man, with 11 sons, with servants, a strong flock. I mean, God was faithful to him. On the flip side, Laban was not blessed by God because of his treachery towards Jacob. God's not going to bless Laban's mess. One of the reasons Laban pursued him was to retrieve some idols that Rachel had stolen. Now, we don't know why Rachel stole these idols. Maybe it was a sign of compensation. Maybe she felt like it was compensation due. Maybe it was a memory for her. Maybe she was secretly worshiping them. But what I hope it was maybe it was to show her father, to not give her father an excuse to worship them. Because Laban, he knew that Jacob's God was real. He knew that he was blessed as a result of Jacob's God. But yet we don't see evidence of him trying to pursue his own relationship with Jacob's God. We don't see where he's trying to change and instead, I think that maybe that is a reason why he didn't want to pursue Jacob's God, is because he didn't want to change the person he was, which was a trickster. He didn't want to change. He wants the gods to serve him rather than him serving God. And with that, I'll end this week's Torah portion. I pray that all of you have a blessed week. Shabbat Shalom.